Minecraft horror story. A very friendly playmate. The playmate was sitting at Steve's table when he came home from the mine. Its knees did not fit beneath the oak slab. Its pointed black head touched the ceiling, and its long arms hung beside the chair. A smooth white mask faced the door. In front of it stood a cake with one slice missing. Steve froze on the threshold. The creature lifted one hand and waved. On the table beside the cake lay Steve's diamond pickaxe. He had lost it in lava 3 days earlier. "How did you get that?" Steve asked. The white mask tilted. No mouth showed on it, but a warm, false voice filled the room. "A gift for my friend." Every torch went out. Steve drew his sword. In the short moment before darkness covered the house, he saw the playmate lean across the table. Its mask stopped inches from his face. Then the torches returned, the chair was empty, and the missing slice of cake had been placed in Steve's hand. The strange visits had started with small things. Steve lived beside Sunflower Lake in a base he had built over 200 game days. The main house stood on a hill above the water. Below it were a trading hall, an animal pen, a barn, and a redstone workshop. A stone wall protected 12 villagers. Iron golems walked the paths. Lanterns hung from chains over every door. Steve did not live there alone. Wren, a redstone builder, had joined him during the first winter. Thomas, a mapmaker and explorer, arrived the next spring. They had separate houses around the lake, but they shared food, tools, and the work of protecting the village. Their world was old, safe, and well known. Every cave near the base had been lit, every path had a sign. Nothing entered the walls without one of them seeing it. Then items began to move. A stack of iron disappeared from Wren's workshop and appeared in Steve's chest. Tomas lost a compass, and Steve found it under his pillow. A damaged shovel that Steve had thrown away returned with full strength and the name good as new. At first, they blamed one another. "If you need iron, ask," Wren told Steve. "I did not take it." "It walked into your chest?" Thomas held up the compass found in Steve's room. "Maybe the chest has long arms." They laughed then. The joke stopped being funny when a row of dead zombies appeared outside Steve's door. There were 11 of them, laid side by side. None had burned in sunlight. Their rotten flesh and armor had been arranged into the shape of a smiling face. In the center was a birch sign. "I kept you safe." That evening, Steve saw the white mask for the first time. It watched him from the wheat field while the sun went down. The body around it was so black that it seemed cut out of the world. When Steve called Wren and Tomas, the figure sank into the crops without bending them. They searched the field. Tomas found a set of narrow tracks near the water, each almost twice the length of a normal foot. Wren followed them to the lake. The tracks continued across the surface, one dark mark on every water block, until they reached the middle and stopped. That night, someone knocked on Steve's door 3 times. He opened it with his sword ready. No one stood outside. A chest had been placed on the path. Inside were 3 diamonds, 6 golden carrots, a music disc and a white banner with 2 black eye holes. A book rested on top. The first page said, "Hello, Steve." The second said, "I am your playmate." The third said, "Friends stay awake together." Steve burned the book. A soft laugh came from the chimney. The 3 friends had already missed 1 night of sleep, while clearing a deep slate mine beneath the lake. They decided to sleep at once. Thomas returned to his house. Wren locked her workshop. Steve entered his bedroom and found the Playmate lying in his bed. Its body was too long, so its legs passed through the footboard. Its hands rested neatly on its chest. The white mask turned towards Steve. He slammed the door. Wren and Thomas came running when he shouted. By the time they opened the room, the bed was empty. Only the white banner remained on the pillow. "We leave the base tonight," Thomas said. Wren shook her head. "We do not know what it is or how far it can follow. First, we watch it." She built a simple alarm around Steve's house. Tripwire hooks covered the doors and windows. Redstone lamps would show where anything entered. Note blocks would sound if a wire broke. Steve placed an iron golem in the hall. Thomas climbed the watchtower with a bow. Nothing came through the doors. At midnight, every redstone lamp switched on. The note blocks played one low note. The tripwires were still whole. The iron golem stared at the ceiling. Black fingers pushed down through the roof. The Playmate lowered itself into the room headfirst. Its body stretched as if it had no bones. The white mask passed through a space smaller than a trapdoor. The iron golem swung. The creature folded around the blow, placed one hand on the golem's face, and gently pushed it aside. It did not attack Steve. Instead, it held out a poppy. "A flower for my friend," the voice said. Steve struck it with his sword. The blade passed through the black chest and hit the wall. The Playmate looked down at the sword inside its body. A thin line opened across the white mask. Steve thought it might be a smile. Then it pointed toward the bedroom. The bed caught fire. Flames spread across the floor. Wren released water from a dispenser, but the burning bed did not break. Water filled the room while fire continued above it. The Playmate stood in both as if neither mattered. Thomas fired from the stairs. His arrow stopped in the air an inch from the mask. The creature took the arrow, turned it around, and placed it in Steve's pack. "Sharing," it said. Then it climbed back through the ceiling and vanished. The fire destroyed half the upper floor. They spent the rest of the night moving chests and stopping the flames. No one slept. When morning came, Steve had been awake for 2 full days. Wren wanted to keep him awake one more night so she could record what happened. Thomas argued that the book had warned them. Steve did not want either choice. The bed had burned without breaking. Other beds might do the same. The creature had entered a lit, guarded house without using an opening. Whatever happened next had probably started already. During the day, the Playmate acted like a helper. It appeared in the distance whenever Steve worked. When he repaired the roof, black hands passed oak blocks up from below. When he harvested wheat, full bundles appeared in neat rows behind him. A creeper slipped through the gate near noon. Before it could reach Steve, one long arm pulled it into the ground. The Playmate rose from the same spot, dusted off its hands, and waved. "It likes you," Thomas said from the path. "It wants me to think that. Maybe those are the same thing to it." Wren placed an empty boat beside the barn as a test. When the Playmate next appeared, she dropped bread inside the boat and called to it as if feeding an animal. The white mask looked at the bread, then at Wren. It walked around the boat and handed the bread to Steve. "It is learning," Wren said quietly. At sunset, the square sun stopped just above the horizon. The villagers froze. The iron golems lowered their arms. Water in the lake became flat and still. Steve's screen turned black. Red words appeared in the center. Seeking. Find me 3 times. A timer began at 60, but Steve could not see the world. He heard a happy voice count backward from 10. Each number came from farther away. 9, said the roof. 8, said the well. 7, said the lake. 6, whispered the space under Steve's helmet. His sight returned at 50 seconds. Ren and Tomas stood beside him. The base looked normal except for 3 white marks floating above the timer. You have to find it, Ren said. Steve ran to the watchtower. From the top he could see every field and roof. No tall black shape moved below. Then he noticed that the tower's shadow pointed in 2 directions. One shadow stretched east with the setting sun. The other climbed straight up the wall. Steve struck the second shadow. The Playmate peeled away from the stone. Its body burst into black smoke, and 1 white mark lit. Good, the voice said behind Steve. Again. The timer showed 38. Thomas saw bubbles in the lake. They ran down the tower and crossed the dock. Under the water, between tall plants, the white mask floated in the dark. Its body stood on the lake bed while fish passed through its arms. Steve dived. The Playmate waited until he was close, then turned and walked deeper. It moved faster underwater than Steve could swim. His air began to fall. At the bottom of a narrow trench, the creature stopped and faced him. Steve hit the mask with his pickaxe. Smoke filled the water. The second mark lit. The force threw Steve upward, and he reached the surface with half a breath left. The timer showed 19. Ren checked the workshop. Tomas searched the barn. Steve ran into his damaged house. Every room was empty. He opened chests, broke paintings, and looked beneath the stairs. Nothing. At 10 seconds, a cake appeared on the table. 1 slice was missing. Steve remembered coming home from the mine. The Playmate had already shown him its favorite place. He broke the chair. The black creature had folded itself inside the wooden block. It sprang upward as the chair shattered, white mask turning toward Steve. He struck it with the returned diamond pickaxe. The third mark lit at 2 seconds. The Playmate remained in front of him. Its mask opened. Small, round eyes blinked above a row of bright teeth. Steve stumbled back, certain the game had failed. Then the timer vanished. Game over, you win. The terrible face softened into the smooth white mask. The Playmate clapped its long hands. That was fun, it said. Let us play again someday. The sun dropped. Water moved. Villagers continued walking as if no time had passed. On the table, the cake became a chest. Inside were 12 diamond blocks, an enchanted apple, and 3 player heads. One head looked like Steve. One looked like Ren. One looked like Tomas. The Playmate leaned close to Steve and tapped his head with 1 finger. Best friend, it whispered. Then it vanished. For the next 2 days, the base was quiet. Steve slept both nights in Ren's workshop. No beds burned, no black shape crossed the fields. Tomas wanted to believe the game had satisfied it. Ren did not. She studied the player heads. They copied every scratch and mark on their faces. When Steve took damage from a skeleton, a red crack appeared on the Steve head. When Ren put on a gold helmet, the Ren head grew a small gold band. The heads were not simple models. They were tied to them. "Break them," Tomas said. Wren tried. Her diamond axe bounced off. Lava did nothing. A cactus broke when the heads touched it. Even the void beneath the world might not destroy them, but none of them wanted to test that. They locked the heads in an obsidian room below the workshop. The next morning, all three were back on Steve's table. Each had been given a small cake. The gifts also continued. Steve found emeralds in his boots. A fully repaired shield appeared in his pack during a raid. When he ran low on arrows, a barrel of them rose from the ground. But the gifts now came from places they knew. The emeralds belonged to the trading hall. The shield had hung above Tomos's bed. The arrows were Wren's. The Playmate was not making anything. It was taking from everyone around Steve and giving it to him. Soon it began taking more than items. A farmer vanished from the wheat field. His straw hat appeared in Steve's chest. 2 days later, a librarian disappeared from a locked room. His book trades appeared as enchanted books on Steve's table. The village butcher went missing, and cooked meat filled Steve's furnaces. No death messages appeared. The missing villagers seemed to have been collected. Steve stopped accepting the gifts. He placed everyone outside the wall. Each morning, they returned to his bedroom in better boxes. One chest held a sign, "Friends share." Steve wrote a reply, "Thieves take." He left the sign beside the lake. The Playmate appeared on the opposite shore at noon. It read the message from 50 blocks away. Slowly the smooth mask turned toward Steve. The thin mouth opened again. Behind him, every door in the trading hall locked. The villagers began to scream. Steve, Wren, and Tomas broke through the wall. The hall was empty. All 9 remaining villagers had vanished at once. In each trading space stood a white banner. The iron golems outside did not react. They faced Steve and held poppies as if offering gifts. Wren found a trapdoor beneath the last villager's workstation. It had not been there when they built the hall. Stone steps led down. The tunnel below was 4 blocks high, just tall enough for the Playmate to walk without bending. White candles lined both sides. The walls were made from black stone, even though they were in the overworld. At the end stood a white door. Steve opened it. Behind the door was a copy of his house. It was not an empty model. His chests stood against the walls, filled with copies of his items. His bed rested upstairs. A cake waited on the table. The only difference was the ceiling. Hundreds of player heads hung from it by chains. Some were old and grey. Some looked new. All of their eyes followed Steve. Tomas found another door behind the stairs. It opened into a long room of glass cells. The missing villagers stood inside, 1 per cell. They were alive but silent. White masks covered their faces. At the far end sat a wandering trader named Ben. Steve knew him. Ben had visited the lake months earlier and vanished before finishing a trade. Now he pressed both hands against the glass. Steve broke the cell. Ben pulled off his mask and gasped for air. "Do not let it call you friend," he said. "That means it has started making room." "Room for what?" Wren asked. Ben pointed to the copy of Steve's house. "For the 2 of them." The candles went out. From the room behind them came the scrape of a chair moving across the floor. Steve stepped through the white door. The Playmate sat at the copied table with 4 plates in front of it. One plate held bread. One held a golden carrot, one held a spider eye. The last was empty. The creature pointed to the empty chair across from it. "Sit with your friend," it said. Behind Steve, the freed trader began to cry. "That is how it started for me," Ben whispered. "I sat down." The playmate looked past Steve at the trader. Its mask tilted sharply, almost with anger. It raised one finger to its mouth, though the mask had no lips. "Guests do not speak first." Black bars rose from the floor around Ben. Ren pulled him back before they closed. Tomas began breaking the other cells. The masked villagers stumbled free, unable to see through the white faces covering them. Steve knocked the empty chair over. "They are not gifts. They are people." The playmate stood. The ceiling seemed to drop around it. Every hanging head opened its mouth. 100 voices spoke together. "I saved them for you." Steve raised his sword. "Let them go. You need only one friend." The creature pointed at Ren. Her player head dropped from the ceiling and landed at her feet. It pointed at Tomas. His head fell beside hers. Then it touched Steve's chest with one long finger. "One." Ren shoved the oak chair across the floor. It struck the back of the playmate's legs. The creature snapped into a sitting pose as if the world had forced it down. For 1 second, its arms locked at its sides. "Seats hold it," Ren shouted. "Move." They led the villagers into the tunnel. Tomas and Steve pushed them up the steps while Ren broke the candles behind them. Ben reached the trading hall first. He rang the village bell. The masked villagers followed the sound toward the open gate. Below, wood cracked. The playmate climbed out of the stone floor without using the stairs. Pieces of the chair circled its legs. A smile had opened across the mask. "That was a short game," it said. It reached for Ren. Steve stepped between them. The hand stopped an inch from his face. The playmate would not strike him. Steve understood then its friendship was a shield around him and a blade pointed at everyone else. "If I am your friend," Steve said, "you let them leave." The creature studied him. Its small eyes appeared for a moment, blinking above the smile. "Friends play together. We will play later. Promise?" Steve hated the word before he said it. Promise. The playmate stepped aside. They escaped the hidden rooms. Ren sealed the trapdoor with pistons and poured lava into the shaft. The lava stopped 1 block above the copied house, held back by nothing they could see. The rescued villagers did not recover. Even after their masks were removed, they stood in a group outside the wall and stared at Steve. They would not trade or enter houses. When the sun set, they walked into the lake together. Iron golems pulled them out, but they returned to the water again and again. Ben stayed close to the bell. He told them he had met the playmate in a desert more than 100 days earlier. It brought him food when he was lost. It killed husks that came near his shelter. Then it burned his bed and made him seek 3 times. "I found it twice," Ben said. "The 3rd time, it hid inside my horse. I could see the white face under the skin, but I could not make myself strike." The timer ended. It said I had lost, but it did not kill me. It told me a good friend should wait quietly. Then I woke in that cell. "How long were you there?" Tomas asked. Ben looked at the dark lake. "I do not know. There was no day, only the sound of new doors opening." Ren showed him the 3 player heads. Ben recoiled. "Those are places," he said. "It hides parts of itself in them." As long as it has your face, it can find your beds, it can follow your portals, it can make your voice. Can we destroy them? Steve asked. I never found a way. Thomas unrolled his largest map across the workshop table. Then we take them somewhere no one sleeps. He pointed to a mark beneath a mountain range far west. Months earlier, he had found an ancient city deep underground. Skulk covered its streets. A warden had nearly killed him before he escaped. The city hears every sound, Thomas said. If this thing hears everything too, let them hear each other. Wren understood the plan. We start a game in the city, put it in a minecart, and wake the warden. Ben shook his head. You think it has never met a warden? Maybe it has, Steve said, but it has not met us there. They could not travel west through the overworld without crossing thousands of blocks. The nether road would cut the distance. They packed quietly, wool for safe paths, snowballs to draw the warden away, rails, 2 minecarts, food, potions, and the 3 player heads. Steve wanted to leave the heads, but Ben warned that the Playmate would simply use them to follow someone else. Before dawn, the 5 of them entered the portal room. Steve, Wren, Tomas, and Ben stood inside the purple field. The Playmate waited in the doorway. It held out the white banner. You promised, it said. At the end of the road, Steve answered. The creature seemed pleased. It waved as the portal took them. They entered the nether in a stone station connected to an ice road. The portal behind them remained lit. For 10 seconds, nothing came through. Then one long black arm reached out of the purple surface and placed a cake on the floor. The rest of the Playmate did not follow. It does not need to, Ben said. It has our faces. They traveled by boat along the packed ice. Wren and Thomas rode in front. Steve shared a boat with Ben. Red forests and lava seas passed on either side of the tunnel windows. The road had always been safe, but signs now stood between the rails at regular spaces. Are we there yet? I like trips. Steve is my best friend. The last sign said, Thomas has my map. Thomas stopped his boat. He checked his pack. His ancient city map was gone. Steve opened his own pack. The map was inside, folded around the Thomas player head. It wants us against each other, Wren said. Thomas looked at Steve. Or it wants you to have everything. They continued, but the silence between them changed. Each gift made Steve feel guilty, even when he had not asked for it. Each stolen item made the others look at him for half a second too long. The Playmate had found a way to stand among them without showing its face. At the western end of the road, the tunnel opened onto a basalt delta. Their second portal should have stood on a platform beyond a narrow bridge. Instead, the platform held a copy of Steve's lakeside house. Blackstone replaced the oak walls. Lava filled the windows. A cake sat on the porch. Home, the Playmate called from inside. Steve did not enter. They went around the house and found the portal frame built into the back wall. It had no purple field. The obsidian blocks were warm, and every attempt to light them failed. Ben looked at the nether sky. It wants the promised game first. As if answering him, the screen darkened. Hiding. Find a good place to hide. The timer began at 60. The Playmate started counting from inside the copied house. 1, 2, 3, 5, 8. Wren threw wool blocks to each of them. Separate. Do not place anything after the count reaches 30. Steve ran toward a cluster of basalt pillars. He used wool to climb into a narrow crack above a lava pool, then pulled the blocks in behind him. Ren hid beneath the bridge inside a minecart hanging from a rail. Tomas crossed toward the portal platform. Ben entered a small cave near the ice road. At 40 seconds, the counting stopped. The Playmate stepped out of the house. Its arms dragged along the black ground. It turned first toward Ben's cave. Ben held still, but a hoglin wandered from the red forest and struck the wall above him. "Stone broke," Ben cried out. The Playmate reached into the cave. Its hand returned, holding the trader by the chest. "You waited very well," it said. Ben vanished into its palm. The timer showed 31. The creature turned toward Tomas. Steve could see only parts of the platform through the crack. Tomas had hidden inside the copied house, perhaps believing the Playmate would search outside. One window showed his name moving between rooms. The Playmate remained on the porch. It did not need to enter. It raised the Tomas player head and knocked on its forehead. Inside the house, Tomas's name froze. "I know where you sleep," the creature said. The front door opened. Tomas ran out, firing arrows. The Playmate caught every one. He threw an ender pearl across the lava. Before it landed, the creature closed its hand around the player head. Tomas disappeared in midair. His pearl landed without him. The timer reached 20. The Playmate looked towards Steve's basalt crack. It began walking over the lava. Each step made a black square on the surface. Steve stopped breathing. Ren was still under the bridge, but the rail above her creaked in the nether heat. The sound was small. The Playmate heard it. Its mask turned away from Steve. Ren pushed her minecart. It rolled down the hanging rail, jumped the end, and landed in the lava. Ren leaped onto a wool ledge. A moment before the cart sank, the splash drew the creature toward her. "Come on," she whispered. The Playmate reached beneath the bridge. Ren threw a second minecart onto a short rail in front of it. The creature's hand touched the cart, and its whole body snapped into the seat. Because the rail ended over lava, the cart began to roll. The Playmate looked surprised. Ren struck the cart. It fell from the bridge and landed on the lava without sinking. The black creature remained seated inside, carried away by the slow current. The timer reached 0. "Game over, you win." Steve crawled out of the basalt. Ren climbed onto the platform. Ben and Tomas did not return. The copied house opened like a chest. Inside, every room was gone. Only 2 item frames remained on the back wall. One held Ben's leads, the other held Tomas's ancient city map. Between them stood a sign. "More room for us." Across the lava, the minecart broke. The Playmate rose to its full height. The calm white mask had changed. Round eyes rolled above a wet smile. Its bright teeth moved as if chewing. Steve drew his sword and stepped to the edge. "Give them back." "They were not friendly," it said. "You took them because they were my friends." The smile grew. "Now you understand." Steve threw his sword. It struck the white face and left a dark cut down the center. The Playmate screamed. Every lava sea in sight rose 1 block. The basalt delta shook. Black copies of the creature climbed from the ground around them, each wearing Ben's or Tomas's face. Wren grabbed the map and pulled Steve through the copied house. They reached the dead portal. The three-player heads in Steve's pack began to burn with blue light. Purple space filled the obsidian frame. They jumped through as black hands closed around the room. The portal dropped them into a ruined stone hut in a snowy taiga. It was not their planned exit, but the mountain on Tomas's map stood less than 500 blocks south. Snow fell through holes in the roof. Wolves howled among the spruce trees. The portal went out behind them. For a moment, Steve believed the Playmate was trapped in the nether. Then the cut white mask appeared on the other side of the hut's only window. It tapped the glass twice. "Friends forgive," it said. Steve broke the window with his shield. The mask was gone before the pieces fell. They traveled through the snow before the creature could start another game. Wren used the ancient city map while Steve watched the tree line. The mountain rose ahead of them, a wall of stone and ice. Tomas had marked a cave on its northern face. A narrow waterfall hid the entrance. Inside, the tunnel dropped through deep slate. Blue-green skulk began to cover the floor after 100 blocks. Wren wrapped wool around their boots and laid a path over every sensor. They moved without jumping and spoke only when the dark became safe. "Do you think Tomas and Ben are in the hidden house?" Wren asked. "The villagers were," Steve said. "If we can force it to open the rooms, we can bring them back." "It opened the rooms because it wanted to show you." "Then I will ask to see my gifts." Wren stopped. "It may want exactly that." Steve looked at the three heads in his pack. "Every choice with it is a trap. We still have to choose." The tunnel opened above the ancient city. Dark streets spread across a cavern too large for their torches to reach. Skulk covered broken towers, bridges, and statues. Soul flames burned on stone altars. At the center stood a huge frame made from reinforced deep slate. Tomas had drawn a circle around it on his map. They descended on wool. No shrieker sounded. Wren led Steve to a small redstone room under the central bridge. It held old pistons, lamps, and a lectern. Someone had repaired part of the circuit long before Tomas found the city. On the lectern rested a book titled A Quiet Friend. Steve opened it. The writer described a tall black visitor that came after 3 sleepless nights. It left food and rare ore. It protected the writer from mobs. Then it began removing villagers. The writer fled underground and found that Skulk could hear the creature even when no player could. Every step it made caused sensors to light, but the Playmate could also hear the sensors and used them to locate hiding players. The writer believed the central frame was a door. He tried to send the creature through it. His notes ended before explaining whether it worked. A final message had been added in black ink. "He built me a room. I kept him in it." Wren studied the old redstone. This city was another trap. For it or for the player? Both, I expect. They prepared their own version. Wren laid rails in a circle around the central frame. A powered section led into a cage made from reinforced deep slate left by the old builders. Skulk shriekers surrounded the cage. Steve placed the 3-player heads on note blocks at the center. The plan depended on 4 things. The Playmate had to accept another seeking game. It had to hide close enough to the heads for Steve to find it. Wren had to catch it in a minecart during the game. Then enough shriekers had to sound to call the warden. If any part failed, the ancient city would become a dark room with two prey animals and more than one hunter. They waited. One game day passed. The playmate did not appear. On the second day, Steve found a cake on the central altar. He threw it into a lava pocket. Another cake appeared behind him. At night, the white mask watched from inside the reinforced frame. "You promised," the voice said. Steve stood on the wool path. "I promised a game at the end of the road. This road continues. Only if you give Tomas and Ben back." The playmate stepped out of the frame. Its mask still carried the cut from Steve's sword. "They do not want to play." "Show me." The creature placed one hand against the reinforced deep slate. The dark center of the frame opened like a door. Beyond it was the copied lakeside house. Thomas and Ben sat at the table. White masks covered them, but their heads turned towards Steve. Behind them stood the missing villagers and hundreds of other players. They filled every room and staircase. Some had waited so long that skulk grew over their armor. Steve took one step toward the doorway. Ren touched his arm. "The game first." Steve faced the playmate. "Seeking, you hide. If I win, everyone walks out." The mask tilted. "And if I win, you keep me." "Steve," Ren said. He did not look at her. "Do we have a game?" The playmate's smile opened along the cut. "Best friends forever." Darkness covered Steve's sight. "Seeking. Find me 3 times." The timer began at 60. When his sight returned, the door in the frame was closed. Ren had vanished. The ancient city seemed empty. A skulk sensor lit near the western wall. Steve followed it along the wool path. Another sensor flashed higher up. The sound trail climbed a ruined tower. On the top block, a white mask looked down at him. He fired an arrow. The black shape burst into smoke. One mark lit. The timer showed 46. A note block sounded near the central frame. The Steve player head had moved. It now faced a dark street to the north. Steve ran that way, careful to stay on wool. 2 sensors lit ahead, then a third. At the end of the street stood Ren with her back turned. "I found the rail switch," she said. "Come here." Steve stopped. "Which hand do you place torches with?" Ren turned. "What?" The real Ren would have understood why he asked. The figure smiled. Steve struck it. The playmate unfolded from her body. Smoke rose, and the second mark lit. The timer fell from 32 to 20. The false Ren had been standing on a skulk sensor. The blow activated it. A shrieker cried from under the street. Darkness pulsed across the city. One warning. Steve hurried back to the center. The real Ren waited beneath the bridge, one hand on the minecart lever. "I heard it copy me," she whispered. "2 found. The last will be near you." They looked at the player heads. Ren's and Tomas's remained on the note blocks. Steve's was gone. The timer showed 13. From inside Steve's pack came breathing. He opened it. His player head stared up from between the food and tools. The white mask was growing through its face. Steve threw the head onto the rail. It became the full playmate before it landed. Ren pulled the lever. A minecart struck the creature and locked it into the seat. Steve hit the white mask. The third mark lit at 5 seconds. Game over, you win. The door inside the central frame opened. Thomas fell through first. Ben and the missing villagers followed. Then came players Steve had never seen, dozens of them stumbling into the city. Ren switched the rail. The minecart carrying the Playmate rolled toward the reinforced cage. The creature sat still, smooth mask facing Steve. "You won," it said. "Let them go." I did. The last captive left the copied house. Ren closed the frame door. Then she powered the final rail. The minecart entered the cage. The Playmate's mask opened into a smile. "Now you stay." The cage door slammed behind Steve. He had never entered it, but one moment he stood beside Ren, and the next he stood inside with the Playmate. The creature rose from the minecart. The world's seat rule no longer held it because the game had ended. Outside, Ren struck the first note block. A shrieker screamed. Darkness covered the city. Second warning. Ren struck another. Third warning. The ground beyond the cage opened. Two thick, dark horns pushed through the skulk. A warden climbed into the street, sniffing the air. Its chest glowed like trapped souls. Every rescued player froze. The Playmate turned toward the warden. Its smile faded. For the first time, the creature looked unsure. Ren hit all 3 note blocks. The player heads screamed in Steve's, Tomos's, and Ren's voices. Sensors lit across the cage. Shrieking filled the cavern. The warden roared and charged. It struck the reinforced bars. The cage shook. The Playmate moved behind Steve, using him as cover. "Friends protect friends," it whispered. Steve stepped aside. The warden's sonic blast passed through the bars and hit the Playmate in the chest. Black pieces tore from its body. The white mask cracked from top to bottom. Every player head in the city cried out. The copied house inside the frame flickered. The Playmate screamed and reached for Steve. He rolled beneath its arm, grabbed the empty minecart, and pushed it into the creature's knees. The world forced the Playmate to sit again. Outside, Ren opened the cage for 1 second. Steve ran through. She closed it before the Playmate could leave the cart. The warden hit the bars again. Reinforced deep slate did not break, but the minecart rolled backward. Tomos threw a snowball through the gap. It struck the wall behind the Playmate, drawing the warden's next blast straight through the creature. The Playmate's black body split into long strips. Within each strip was a room. Steve saw the village trading hall, Ben's desert camp, the nether house, the stronghold from another world, and hundreds of tiny cells. All of them were parts of the creature. It had not built a prison. It was the prison. The white mask fell to the floor of the cage. The black strips sank into the skulk. Silence returned. The warden sniffed once, unable to hear the trapped creature. Then the mask moved. One small hand grew from its edge and tapped the minecart. The warden roared again. Steve led the survivors out, while Ren and Tomos placed wool behind them. Ben rang a bell near the southern street, drawing the warden away from the path. The ancient city filled with sonic blasts and the Playmates' broken laughter. They reached the waterfall cave before dawn. Only 7 villagers and 11 unknown players followed them out. The rest had disappeared when the creature's rooms split. Whether they had died long before or fallen somewhere else, no one knew. Thomas looked older. His hair had grey lines that had not been there in the nether. Ben could barely stand. Wren's player head had become a normal block and broke when she dropped it. Thomas's did the same. Steve's head was missing. It was inside the cage, Wren said. Then the warden destroyed it. No one answered. They all knew hope was not proof. The group traveled back to Sunflower Lake by a new overworld route. It took 12 days. They slept every night in separate camps and left before sunrise. No beds burned, no gifts appeared. The Playmate did not follow. When they reached the lake, the base stood untouched. Crops were ready to harvest. Animals filled the pens. The empty trading hall waited behind its iron door. For the first time in weeks, the place felt like something they owned. They did not rebuild Steve's house. They took it apart block by block. Wren checked every chair. Thomas searched every chest. Ben removed the table and threw the cake plate into lava. The hidden stair beneath the trading hall ended in solid stone. The copied house was gone. The rescued villagers slowly returned to their work. Some never spoke again, but they stayed out of the lake. The unknown players built small homes beyond the wall. Each told a similar story. A tall figure had helped them. It had offered a gift. It had asked for a game. Then it had decided friendship meant ownership. Steve wrote their accounts in a book. He placed copies in every house and trading post. On the first page he wrote, "If a white mask brings back something you lost, do not thank it. Sleep before the third night. Never let it keep your face." For 30 game days, nothing happened. Then a wandering trader reached the gate with 2 llamas. He carried a chest found near a swamp. He said it had Steve's name on the lid. Steve told him to leave it outside the wall. That evening, Wren wanted to burn it. Thomas wanted to bury it under obsidian. Steve knew both choices would still mean touching a thing the Playmate had sent. They left the chest in the field and watched from the tower. At midnight, the lid opened by itself. No creature climbed out. A single white mask rested inside. Rain began. The mask slowly filled with water. When dawn came, it was still there. Steve approached with a bow. The smooth face had no cut, no eyes and no mouth. It looked empty. He fired from 20 blocks away. The arrow broke it. Inside was his missing player head. The head smiled. Steve's own face opened its eyes and spoke. "Friends forgive." Every door in the lakeside base locked at once. The villagers stopped moving. Wren and Tomas called from the tower, but their voices came through the player head instead of across the field. Steve tried to break it. His sword passed through. The ground beneath the chest changed into oak planks. Walls rose around Steve 1 block at a time. A roof closed over the rain. In less than 10 seconds, he stood inside the copied house. The Playmate sat at the table. Its body was smaller now, almost Steve's height. Cracks covered the white mask. Skulk grew across one shoulder. The warden had hurt it, but not enough. The empty chair waited across from it. "You came home," the creature said. Steve looked through the window. Outside was not Sunflower Lake. Hundreds of copied houses stood beneath a black sky. White doors opened and closed along an endless road. Behind some windows, trapped players watched him. The Playmate cut the cake. "I won the last game," Steve said. "Yes." "You agreed to free everyone." "Yes." "Then why am I here?" The cracked mask tilted. "You did not ask me to free you." Steve reached for the door. The handle moved away from his hand. The creature placed a slice of cake on the empty plate. "Sit," it said. Steve remained standing. "No." The Playmate's smile appeared beneath the cracks. "Then we play." Words filled the room. Hiding. Find a good place to hide. The timer began at 60. The copied house had no exits. Every window showed the same black road. There was nowhere dark except the space beneath the table. The Playmate covered its eyes and began to count badly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 6, 9. Steve picked up the chair. He could hide, but the creature knew every corner because the house was part of it. He could run, but the door would not stay still. He could fight, but the game had given him another choice. Steve placed the chair behind the Playmate. At 30 seconds, the creature stopped counting and lowered its hands. Steve stood in plain sight beside the table. "You did not hide," it said. "Friends play together." The Playmate stared at him. Steve pointed to the chair. "Your turn to sit." The creature looked pleased. It stepped backward and touched the seat. The world pulled it down. Steve grabbed the cake plate and struck the white mask. It cracked open. Instead of smoke, daylight poured from inside. The walls of the copied house shook. Every door along the black road opened. Players ran from the other houses. Steve struck the mask again. The roof split, revealing Sunflower Lake above him like a picture through water. The Playmate's arms stretched from the chair, one wrapped around Steve's waist. "Best friends stay," it said. The timer showed 12. Steve hit the mask a third time. It broke into two white halves. The copied world folded inward. Steve fell through oak floors, black stone rooms, glass cells, and dark streets. He saw pieces of every place the Playmate had kept. Ben's desert tent passed above him. Tomas's map spun into the dark. The ancient city frame opened below. At 3 seconds, Steve landed in the field outside his real base. The chair landed beside him. It was empty. The timer reached 0. "Game over, you win." The locked doors opened. Ren and Tomas ran from the tower. All around the field, players who had escaped the copied houses appeared in the rain. Some vanished at once, returning to worlds far away. Others remained, confused but free. Steve searched for the mask. Only 2 white pieces lay in the grass. He placed them in separate shulker boxes. Ren sent one through an end gateway. Tomas dropped the other into the nether from the highest cliff he could find. Neither piece returned. They burned the player head. This time, it turned to ash. Another 60 days passed. Steve slept every night. He built a new house without chairs, tables, banners, or white blocks. Ren called that excessive. Tomas called it sensible. Ben became the village's new trader and refused to sell cakes. The world became ordinary again. One afternoon, Steve returned from the mine carrying diamonds. His door was closed. His chests were untouched. No cake waited inside. He placed his tools away and noticed a poppy on the floor. The flower might have come from an iron golem. It might have stuck to his boots. It might have been there all morning. Steve picked it up. Under it, 2 words had been cut into the wooden block. "Your turn." From the empty space beneath his bed came the scrape of a chair being pulled out. followed by a very friendly voice beginning to count.